The letter arrived one morning, as I stared at the last shred of my past, the old orphanage that had been home since I was 7. Your inheritance is a plot of 500 acres. My sister, Emma, and I looked at each other, trying to make sense of the words. It was all we had left from the family we never knew. But the land, it seemed like a joke. 500 acres of empty, overgrown space, and that wasn't all. The second part of the letter was the one that made me pause, a hidden underground bunker, location undisclosed. My heart sank. Was it a trap? Or had we finally been given something that was meant to be ours? If you've ever wondered if there's more to your life than what you've been given, subscribe. These kinds of stories are for you. Growing up, Emma and I were two sides of the same broken coin. The orphanage was our home, or rather our cage. The iron bars were invisible, but they felt as real as the cold concrete floors and the faded, peeling walls that surrounded us every day. We didn't belong anywhere, and no one ever came for us. Not once, not ever, no calls, no visits, no letters. I often imagined what it would be like to have someone to care for me, to tell me it would be okay. But instead, we were just another set of forgotten children, discarded, abandoned, shoved aside by a world that didn't know our names and didn't care to. The nights were the worst. I could feel the emptiness in every room, the space between me and the others. Emma and I were close, sure, but even in the crowded dormitory, I often felt more alone than ever. She and I shared everything, our dreams, our silent hopes that one day something would change. But that was just a dream. Life didn't care about our hopes. It just kept moving forward, indifferent to our pain. I was 18 when I aged out of the system. It wasn't a dramatic exit. There were no grand goodbyes, no emotional send-offs. I was simply handed a few meager possessions and pushed out into the world like a stray dog. The state had done its job, fed me, clothed me, kept me alive, but they never gave me a future. That was up to me, whatever that meant. Emma, still younger, was left behind in the orphanage. She was only 16, and though we both feared this day would come, it didn't hurt any less when it did. The day I left, I felt like I was leaving her to face the same cold reality we'd both been handed. I wanted to fight, to scream at the world for treating us this way, for casting us aside as if we didn't matter. But all I had was a broken heart and a backpack full of things that wouldn't change anything. The first few weeks were brutal. I lived in cheap motels and barely scraped by, working odd jobs that didn't pay enough to feed myself, let alone find a place to call home. I moved through life like a shadow, blending in with the walls, not even noticed by the world. It was as if I wasn't even there. But I was alive, and I had one thing, Emma. I would not let her be lost in the same void. I called her every week, and each time she sounded more and more lost. I tried to make things work, tried to be strong for both of us. But we were running on empty, and the hope was slipping through our fingers. I felt like I was failing her, failing myself, failing us. And then, one day, a letter arrived, the one that changed everything. At first, I thought it was just another formality, another piece of junk mail. But it was. The letter told us that we had inherited something, land, a plot of 500 acres, all the way out in the middle of nowhere. I didn't know what to feel. How could a piece of land change anything? It seemed like a cruel joke. Inheritance for us. How could that even be real? The letter also mentioned something else, a hidden underground bunker. At first, I didn't think much of it. It felt like just another oddity thrown into the mix, but something about it stuck with me. A bunker. Why was it mentioned? What did it mean? Why would we inherit a strange, run-down piece of land with a hidden structure? And why had no one ever mentioned it before? Who left this for us? And why now, after everything we had been through? It felt like a glimmer of something, a lifeline, a mystery, or maybe just a cruel distraction. But Emma and I knew we had no choice. This land, this inheritance, however odd it seemed, was all we had now. We packed our things, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something. A feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. But even then, we couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the world had given us this land for a reason. And it was a reason we hadn't figured out yet. We had nothing left to lose, so we decided to go. The letter was the only promise we had, and I couldn't let Emma down again. We were about to step into a story we never saw coming, a story that would haunt us, a story that would leave us with tears in our eyes. The decision to leave the orphanage wasn't one I made lightly. It wasn't a choice, really. When you're 18 and the system no longer has a place for you, it's not really about decisions. It's about survival. The moment I walked out of those gates, I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a vague sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, life could be different. Emma was still in the orphanage, and I promised myself that I would figure it out for both of us. But the world outside felt colder than I ever imagined. It was a place where no one cared to see me, no one asked if I was okay. I was just a face in the crowd, ignored and invisible, much like I had always been. I found a small apartment, barely big enough for one, let alone two. It was nothing fancy, just enough space to breathe, to survive. I worked as a dishwasher in a diner, my hands constantly smelling like grease and soap, my mind always somewhere else, thinking about Emma, thinking about how I could make it work. I wasn't ready to give up on her. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, the weight of isolation pressed harder against me. I had made it out of the orphanage, but I hadn't escaped the feeling of being an outsider in a world that didn't want me. I sent Emma money, called her whenever I could, but the conversation was always the same. She was struggling, and she didn't know how much longer she could hold on. That ache in my chest, the ache of knowing I wasn't there for her when she needed me most, was unrelenting. Then came the letter. It was a plain envelope, the kind you toss aside without a second thought, but I didn't. I had seen too many letters come through that apartment door, bills, notices, and advertisements, but this one felt different. I opened it, not knowing what to expect. And what I read sent a chill through me. We are writing to inform you of the inheritance left to you by your late relative. Enclosed is the deed for 500 acres of land located in the small town of Cedar Hollow. Please see the attached documents for further details. Additionally, the land includes an underground structure that has been marked on the property map. That was it. No salutation, no greeting, just a stark, impersonal announcement of something I had never known existed. An inheritance. From whom? I stood there holding the letter, my hands trembling slightly. I read the words again as if expecting them to change, to reveal some hidden truth. 500 acres, an underground bunker. Who could have left this to us? I didn't know anyone with land, especially not land this big. The only family I had ever known was Emma, and we had been separated for years. The thought of a distant relative, someone we never even knew existed, leaving us something felt impossible. It didn't make sense. I immediately called Emma, hoping she had gotten the same letter. Maybe it was some sort of mistake, a cruel joke, but when she picked up, her voice was unsteady. She hadn't received anything. She hadn't heard a word from anyone. The letter was only addressed to me. I couldn't process it. I didn't know what to think. The idea of inheritance had always seemed like a foreign concept to us. In the orphanage, we learned to live without expecting anything, let alone a fortune or some hidden treasure. Everything I had ever known was filled with rejection. No one had ever cared enough to look out for us. So, why now? Why was this being given to us after all these years? I knew I had to see it for myself. I couldn't just leave this mystery hanging in the air, and Emma needed me to figure it out. I called her again the next day, letting her know I would be going to Cedar Hollow. I could hear the skepticism in her voice, but she didn't argue. It seemed we had both reached the point where we couldn't afford to ignore anything that might change our lives. I packed a small bag, not knowing what to expect. I left the apartment early the next morning, taking the bus to Cedar Hollow, which was about a 4-hour drive away. My mind raced as I stared out the window, watching the landscape pass by. The closer I got to the town, the more the gnawing feeling of confusion and anticipation took hold. I felt like I was heading to a place I had never been, both physically and emotionally. It wasn't just the land I was inheriting. It was something I couldn't name. Some hidden part of my past, of who I was, that I had been waiting to uncover. The town was small, quieter than I could have imagined. It felt like stepping into a time that had long been forgotten. The roads were cracked, the houses worn down, the streets empty of life. When I arrived, I found myself staring at an old post office and a few scattered shops that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. I went to the local office, where the deed to the land was waiting for me. The clerk handed over the paperwork with little more than a polite nod. I asked about the underground bunker. She only shrugged. It's just an old structure. People have been using the land for years, but no one really talks about it. She said it like it was just another piece of forgotten history, left to rot in the ground. When I drove out to the property, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all pressing down on me. The land stretched out before me, thick with overgrown grass and weeds. Nothing looked valuable. Nothing looked like it would be worth anything. The thought of this empty land holding some kind of treasure seemed laughable. I stood in front of the old farmhouse, looking at the overgrown fields, unsure of what to do next. The wind kicked up the grass around me, whispering through the trees. I walked toward the back of the farmhouse and stumbled upon a hidden trapdoor, half buried in the dirt. My heart skipped. Could this be the bunker? The metal was rusted, the door barely hanging on its hinges. I tried to pull it open, but it wouldn't budge. And then I heard it, a faint scraping noise from inside, like something was moving. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a random inheritance. It wasn't just land. It was something much bigger, something that had been hidden for a reason. I wasn't sure whether I should open it, whether I should step into the unknown and risk what might be waiting for me. But the desire to understand what had been left for us was stronger than the fear. I called Emma, my voice barely a whisper, and told her what I had found. "We need to do this together," I said. This is our chance to finally have something." And so we decided to open it. What we found inside would change everything. What we discovered in the depths of that forgotten bunker was not just buried history, but a truth that had been hidden for decades. A truth that would tear open the wounds of betrayal and lead us to the most unexpected treasure of all. But we were not prepared for what came next. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a pale, amber glow across the vast expanse of land. For the first time since we'd arrived at the farm, it felt like we were alone in a world that had forgotten us. Emma and I stood there, staring at the trapdoor, unsure whether it was an invitation or a warning. The wind blew across the overgrown fields, sending ripples through the grass, as if the land itself were whispering something we couldn't hear. The air was thick with dust, the scent of old wood and the sharp tang of earth. There was something unsettling about this place, something I couldn't quite place. The feeling of being watched lingered in the back of my mind, even though no one else was around for miles. I took a step closer to the trapdoor, my hand instinctively reaching for the rusted metal handle. The door groaned in protest as I tugged at it, but it wouldn't open. "Do you think we should open it?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible, almost drowned out by the wind. I looked at her, my heart pounding in my chest. The decision seemed so simple, yet so heavy. I'd been searching for something, anything, to make all of this worth it. To prove that we weren't meant to just survive, we were meant to thrive. But standing there in front of the trapdoor, I felt more like a trespasser than an heir. "We've come this far," I said, my voice steady despite the uncertainty I felt. "We can't leave without knowing what's down there. This is ours, Emma, this land. Whatever's hidden beneath it, it's part of our story now." I bent down, scraping my fingers against the sides of the trapdoor. The dirt was soft, but the metal was stubborn. I pulled harder, gritting my teeth as the hinges creaked. Then, with one final yank, the door gave way, opening to reveal a steep, narrow set of wooden steps leading downward into the darkness. I hesitated for a moment, the pit of my stomach heavy with doubt. The sunlight from above barely reached the bottom, and the further down I looked, the darker it seemed to get. My breath quickened. "What if it's just an old storage room?" I muttered, mostly to myself, though I could feel Emma's eyes on me. "I don't care," she whispered back. "I need to know." Her voice, filled with quiet resolve, pushed me forward. We had no other choice. We couldn't just turn back, not now. Not when we were so close to uncovering whatever secret this land held. I took a deep breath and began my descent, my boots crunching against the wood with each step. Emma followed closely behind, her presence reassuring yet anxious. The air inside the bunker was stale, the smell of mildew and rot hanging in the atmosphere. It was a tight, narrow space, the walls lined with wooden beams that seemed to sag under the weight of years of neglect. The silence here was different, deeper, heavier. It felt like the walls were holding their breath, waiting for something. Us, maybe. I moved cautiously, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. At the bottom of the stairs, the room stretched before me, larger than I expected. Dust-covered crates and old furniture were scattered across the floor, a few broken shelves lining the walls. But there was something else, something more than just forgotten objects. I walked farther into the space, my feet kicking up dust with each step. That's when I saw it, a large wooden chest, half hidden behind a stack of crates in the corner. The chest was old, its surface cracked and worn, as though it had been left untouched for decades. The golden lock on the front glinted faintly in the dim light, as if it were calling to me. "Do you think we should open it?" Emma asked again, her voice trembling. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, and I felt the same. But I had to know. Whatever this was, whatever it held, it was the key to everything we had been searching for. The key to why we were brought here, to prove we weren't just some random orphans tossed aside by the world. "Let's see what's inside," I said, reaching for the lock. The moment my fingers touched it, I felt a strange jolt, like the chest had been waiting for me. I tugged at the lock and it clicked open, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent room. I lifted the lid slowly, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, it was filled with old papers, dusty books, and photographs. My fingers brushed over the contents, each one more confusing than the last. The papers were yellowed and brittle, some torn at the edges. But it wasn't the papers that caught my attention, it was what lay beneath them. At the very bottom of the chest, hidden under a stack of old files, was a small, faded leather-bound book. I picked it up carefully, almost reverently. As soon as my fingers touched the cover, I knew it was important. The weight of it felt like something more than just a book. It felt like a piece of history, a piece of my family's story that had been buried for so long. Emma leaned over my shoulder, her breath catching as she saw the book. "What is it?" she whispered. I didn't know yet, but I could feel that this was it. This was the moment everything would change. Whatever had been hidden, whatever secret the bunker was guarding, was about to be uncovered. And with it, our entire world would shift. The quiet desperation I had been carrying for so long was beginning to fade. We were finally starting to find the pieces of the puzzle. But there was something more, something deeper lurking beneath the surface of this discovery. Something that would lead us to even darker corners of our past. We weren't prepared for what would come next. We thought we knew what we had inherited, but we had no idea what was truly buried beneath the earth, or how it would change our lives forever. The moment I opened that chest, the room seemed to shift. It wasn't just the musty air or the weight of dust that had settled on everything in the bunker. It was something deeper, something that clung to the very air itself. I had expected old family mementos, maybe a forgotten diary or a few dusty trinkets, relics of a past that no longer mattered. But what I found was far beyond what I could have ever imagined. The leather-bound book in my hands felt heavy, like it had been waiting for me for years, hidden in the depths of that chest. The cover was cracked and worn, its edges frayed as though it had been opened thousands of times, only to be tucked away once more. It felt ancient, like a secret that had been locked away for generations. And the moment I held it, I knew that I was holding more than just a book. I was holding a key to something that had been buried under the weight of time and silence. I opened the book, my fingers trembling slightly as I turned the yellowed pages. The handwriting was neat, precise, but the words were unfamiliar. They were written in a language I didn't recognize, a strange mix of symbols and letters that twisted in ways that made my stomach churn with unease. "Emma," I whispered, my voice barely audible as I stared at the pages. "This isn't just a journal. It's a map." I could hear Emma's breath catch behind me as she leaned in closer, trying to make sense of the symbols on the pages. "What does it mean?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion. I didn't know yet, but the first clue was there, hidden within the lines of the pages. There, halfway through the book, was a folded piece of paper, old and brittle, its edges curling like it had been tucked away for too long. I carefully unfolded it, my heart racing in anticipation. The map was rough, jagged, drawn in charcoal-like strokes, and it seemed to lead somewhere deeper within the land. The markings on it were unmistakable, the farmhouse, the bunker's location, and then something more, a small X marking a spot hidden in the woods. But what was even more unsettling was the phrase scrawled across the top of the map, "The door that never opens." My pulse quickened. There was more to this than we had been told. This wasn't just an inheritance. This was a test, a secret buried beneath the land, and we had only just begun to uncover it. The days that followed the discovery of the map blurred together. Emma and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something vast, something ancient that had been buried beneath layers of dust and time. We tried to go about our routines, cleaning the farmhouse, sorting through the remnants of the barn, but everything seemed to shift in tone. The land wasn't just land anymore. It was a puzzle, and every piece we touched only deepened the mystery. I spent hours each day in the small, dimly lit room of the farmhouse, studying the map and the book. The language in the book didn't make sense, but the more I looked at the map, the clearer it became. The X in the woods was important. It wasn't a mistake or a random marking. I could feel it in my bones, that primal instinct telling me that this was no mere inheritance. It was a legacy, a secret that had been hidden for a reason. Emma grew anxious. I could see it in her eyes whenever I looked up from the map. The land itself felt off. We had walked the property together, and while the earth was beautiful, there was something about it that felt too still, like we were being watched. The trees stood unnaturally quiet, and the winds didn't move the branches the way they should have. It felt like the whole place was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. But I couldn't explain it to her, not yet. There was too much at stake. One afternoon, I took the map and walked toward the woods, Emma following at a distance, hesitant but curious. We passed the farmhouse, the barn, and the pond, heading deeper into the dense trees. The air shifted as we moved, and I could feel a strange energy around me. The trees grew taller, their branches twisting in unnatural patterns, and the ground beneath us became more uneven, as if something had been disturbed long ago. Then I saw it. The large, moss-covered rock in the middle of a small clearing. My heart began to race as I approached it. The markings on the rock were faint, barely visible, but they were there. Symbols similar to those in the book, My fingers traced them as the chill in the air intensified. "This is it," I whispered to Emma. "We're close." I moved closer, and at the base of the rock, hidden beneath a layer of moss and dirt, was a small metal hatch. It was old, too old, with a rusted lock. The ground around it was disturbed, as though someone had tried to open it before but couldn't. My mind raced with questions. Could this be the door that never opens? The hatch was just the beginning. The discovery of this hidden entrance opened a floodgate of possibilities. Something beneath the earth, hidden from us, was waiting to be found. But the question remained: what had been buried down there all these years, and who had gone to such lengths to hide it? We stood there for a moment, silence enveloping us, both of us sensing the weight of what we had uncovered. We were no longer simply caretakers of an old farm. We were uncovering a buried family secret, one that would change everything we thought we knew about our past. If you've ever felt lost, like you've been wandering, with no one to guide you, if stories of discovery hit you deep inside, subscribe. The discovery of the hidden hatch beneath the moss-covered rock was the kind of moment that changes everything. For a while we stood there, staring at it, not knowing whether to open it or leave it buried. But I knew deep down that we couldn't turn back. Whatever this was, whatever had been hidden beneath this land for so long, it had a purpose, a reason we had been given this property, a reason we had been led to it. The unease, however, had started to settle in. The land, which had once felt like an endless expanse of opportunity, was now pressing in on us. We had stepped too far into something that wasn't just old memories and dusty boxes. It was a legacy wrapped in secrecy, something that had been kept from us for a reason. When I first found the hatch, I was consumed with curiosity. I wanted to know what was inside, who would. But as the days went on, a creeping sense of dread began to follow me everywhere. It wasn't just the land that felt off, it was everything. The house, the barn, even the small pond we had passed earlier on our way to the woods. It felt like it was all watching us, waiting. The trees stood so still that it was unnerving. Not a single leaf moved in the wind. It was as if nature itself had grown tired of being ignored. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it stuck with me like a shadow. Emma, too, seemed on edge, though she never said anything. Her silence was more alarming than words, and I could see the anxiety building in her eyes every time I returned to the bunker. She didn't ask any questions, but I knew she could feel it too. Whatever was buried beneath the earth was no longer just a mystery. It was becoming a weight, a burden on our shoulders. We continued working around the farm, taking on the day-to-day tasks of clearing debris and sorting through the wreckage. But the tension was always there, like a storm just waiting to break. And then it did. It started small, a phone call from the lawyer, a reminder that we had to sort out some official matters regarding the land and its ownership. But the lawyer's voice, unusually terse, sent a chill down my spine. There was something off about his tone, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. When I asked him about the history of the land, he grew quiet, reluctant to speak. His answers were short, clipped, as though he were walking on eggshells. It was clear he didn't want to talk about it. And then he ended the conversation abruptly, telling me to stick to the paperwork. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than just legal formalities. Something was being hidden, something much bigger than we could imagine. The next few days brought more subtle signs that we weren't alone. Emma had been hearing noises in the barn at night. Small sounds at first, the creaking of wood, the rustling of something in the darkness. But one evening, she swore she saw a figure standing in the window of the barn. A shadow, tall and thin, watching her from the other side. When I went to check, there was no one, just empty space. But Emma was convinced she wasn't imagining it. "Someone's been here," she told me one morning as we sat at the old kitchen table. "I don't know who, but I saw someone. It wasn't just her. I began to feel it too." the feeling of eyes on us, of being watched. I tried to brush it off as nerves, but the more I tried to ignore it, the stronger the sensation became. It was as if something had been waiting for us to unlock the secrets of this land, something that didn't want us here. And then the letters started coming. At first, they were innocuous enough, just letters from the local county office about the land's history. But then came one that stopped me dead in my tracks. It was from a law firm in a nearby city, but it wasn't about the land. It was about us. The letter claimed to have records of our family, and not the kind of records I wanted to see. It mentioned the exact land we had inherited, and that was when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The letter wasn't addressed to me or Emma. It was addressed to a different name, someone who seemed to have been part of our family history, but had been erased from time. The letter spoke of unfinished business and a buried legacy, words that echoed in my mind long after I read them. I couldn't show Emma the letter. Not yet. She was already worried enough. But I knew we couldn't ignore this anymore. Whoever had left us this inheritance, whoever had left us this land, they were connected to something dark, something sinister. And that's when the threats began. It started with small things, strange tire tracks outside our barn, fresh and deep, like someone had been lurking, watching. The ground near the barn was disturbed, as though something heavy had been dragged through. Then, one night, a large tree near the edge of the property was felled. No storm had come through. It was as if someone had come in the dead of night and cut it down deliberately. The next morning, I found a note nailed to the remaining stump of the tree. The handwriting was scrawled and messy, like it had been written in a rush. The message was simple: "Leave now, you don't know what you've uncovered." I felt the weight of those words. The message was clear. Someone didn't want us here. Whoever had been watching us, whoever had been lurking in the shadows of this land, they were making their presence known. But I wasn't ready to back down. Not now. We were close. We had come too far, but the deeper we dug, the more resistance we faced. There was something or someone on this land that was pushing back against us, and they weren't going to stop. Whoever they were, whatever they were hiding, they were making sure we didn't find the truth. Emma, though scared, didn't want to run either. We had already been abandoned once. But this time we had something to fight for, a place to belong, a legacy, even if it was hidden beneath layers of mystery and darkness. But we knew that whatever secrets this land held, they weren't going to give themselves up easily. The more we uncovered, the more we realized that there were forces at play here, forces older and more dangerous than we could understand. And as the days passed, I could feel the walls closing in. Whoever was trying to stop us had only just begun. The stakes were rising. The danger was real, and there was no turning back. The world had already started to feel like it was collapsing around us. Every day something new, more disturbing, more confusing came our way. The threats, the eerie presence that had settled on the land, and the increasing sense that someone was watching us had drained what little hope we'd been clinging to. Emma and I were no longer just fighting to survive. We were fighting to uncover something we couldn't quite understand, but something that seemed destined to change the course of our lives forever. One cold evening, after another restless night of hearing strange noises outside the farmhouse, I made a decision. We had to push deeper into the mystery of the land, no matter the cost. The underground bunker, the strange map, and the unsettling letters all pointed to one thing. We were meant to uncover something here. And whatever that was, it had been buried for a reason. I couldn't shake the feeling that the land was trying to protect its secrets. Each step we took, the atmosphere grew heavier. The trees around us seemed more watchful, the barn more sinister, the sky more oppressive. Emma, her eyes red from lack of sleep, agreed that we couldn't keep running from the truth. She was determined, but I could see the fear in her eyes. That night, we decided to enter the bunker again. This time, we weren't just exploring, we were digging for answers. The dark, musty air of the underground room seemed to close in on us as we descended the stairs. The bunker, once a silent, empty space, now felt different. It felt alive, as though it had been waiting for us to return. I led Emma through the cold, narrow passage, the flickering light of our flashlights casting strange shadows on the walls. My heart raced as I turned the corner, leading her toward the final hidden compartment. And that's when we found it. At first, I thought it was just another old box, hidden under a pile of rubble. But when I reached for it, I realized it wasn't a box at all. It was a metal panel. We pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment in the floor beneath it. A small, locked metal box lay inside, covered in dirt and dust. The lock was rusty, but it wasn't too difficult to break open. I pulled it free, my hands trembling as I turned the key. Inside, we found a stack of papers, a set of photographs, and, most unexpectedly, a letter. The letter was old, handwritten, the ink faded and barely legible. As I read the words aloud, Emma's face turned pale. "If you're reading this, then it means the family legacy has been forgotten. For that, I am deeply sorry, but there are things you must understand. The land you've inherited is not just land. It's a key to something much larger. I was forced to hide the truth to protect you, to protect all of us. The bunker was built for one reason, to keep the secret buried. What's hidden there is not just an inheritance. It's a legacy of power, and the world is not ready for it." The letter continued, but the weight of those words hit me like a tidal wave. Power, legacy. This wasn't just some forgotten piece of family history. This was far bigger than we'd ever imagined. The photographs in the box were next, old pictures of our family, generations of people we didn't know. But what struck me wasn't the faces, it was the symbols. They were carved into the walls of the bunker, marked on the pages of the letter, and stamped onto a ledger I found tucked underneath. Symbols that matched the markings I had seen on the land, the ones we had thought were just scribbles in the book. But then came the real shock. As I flipped through the papers, I found a deed. But it wasn't just any deed. It was a deed to land, but not our land. It was the deed to another 500 acres, located miles away, hidden beneath the surface of the property we had inherited. The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. The 500 acres we had been given wasn't the real inheritance. The land had been a distraction, a cover-up. The true inheritance lay beneath the surface, in a hidden area, and the key to it was buried in that very bunker. But why had it been hidden? What was it that our family had been trying to protect? We weren't dealing with some simple, old family land. We had inherited a powerful secret, one that others would go to great lengths to keep hidden. Suddenly, the threats made sense. The letters, the warnings, the unsettling feelings that had plagued us all these days, they weren't just coincidental. Someone didn't want us to find out the truth. Someone had been watching us, tracking us, waiting for us to unlock the secrets buried deep beneath the land. But we were too far in now. There was no turning back. The mystery had already taken root, and as Emma and I stood there, our hands shaking as we pieced the truth together, I realized that everything we thought we knew about our family, our inheritance, and our future had been a lie. The weight of the letter, the photographs, and the hidden deed hung heavy around us, as if the very air in the bunker had thickened with the truth we had unearthed. Emma and I sat in silence for what felt like hours, the shadows of the underground space creeping closer with each passing moment. Our discovery had shattered the fragile illusion that our inheritance was just a piece of land, a way out, a fresh start. It wasn't just a legacy. It was a curse, a dangerous secret that had been buried for a reason. I could feel the walls closing in on us, the reality of what we had uncovered settling in like the darkness around us. We had been so certain that this inheritance, this piece of land, would be our redemption. That it would somehow make up for the years of rejection, the years spent in an orphanage, the years of not belonging. But now, with the truth staring us in the face, I felt more lost than ever. I looked at Emma, who had been quiet for too long, her eyes wide with disbelief. She wasn't the person I recognized, the brave, hopeful sister who always knew how to keep moving forward. She was broken. Her face was pale, and I could see the deepening fear in her eyes. I knew she felt it too. The land, this secret, it was too much. It was more than we could handle. "We shouldn't have come here," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "We shouldn't have opened this door." She pushed the stack of papers away from her as if they were burning her fingers. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, a dark heat rising in my chest. It wasn't fair. None of it was. Everything we had ever wanted, a place to belong, a chance to make something of ourselves, had led us here, to a land that was full of darkness, full of lies. The more I tried to convince myself that it would be worth it, the harder it became to believe. The tension in the air was suffocating, and for the first time since we'd inherited the land, I began to wonder if we were better off without it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that we had come so far and we couldn't turn back now. The buried truth was like a wound, and the more we dug into it, the more it hurt. The land we had thought would give us a fresh start was now a prison, and the key to that prison was the very secret we had uncovered. What was hidden beneath the land was not just family history or old memories. It was a legacy of power, and power, as we were learning, was never meant for people like us. I wanted to give up. The weight of everything was too much. The years of loneliness, the years of rejection, and now this. The land had promised hope, but all it had given us was more questions, more fear, more uncertainty. I could feel the anger welling up inside me, but it wasn't anger at the land or the family who had hidden this from us. It was anger at myself for ever believing that something good could come from it. I stood up, my hands shaking as I tried to hold back the tears. "I don't know what we're supposed to do, Emma," I whispered. "I don't know how to fix this." I thought this was the answer. Emma stood beside me, her hands wringing the edges of her jacket, the tears finally spilling over. "I thought we could escape. But it feels like we're trapped here, like this thing is bigger than us." She wiped her eyes, but the tears kept coming. "I can't do this anymore." The words hung between us like a heavy fog. We had both thought this inheritance would save us, but instead, it was pulling us deeper into something we couldn't understand, something far beyond our control. The land wasn't a gift. It was a burden, a secret that had waited decades to break us. We were breaking. The silence between us was deafening as we stood there, alone in the cold, damp bunker. There were no answers. Only more questions, and we were too tired to keep searching. We had uncovered a family secret, but it felt like we had lost ourselves in the process. All the strength I thought I had, all the resilience I had built, had crumbled in that moment. We weren't just struggling with the weight of our inheritance anymore. We were struggling with the weight of our own brokenness, and I didn't know how much longer I could carry it. The night outside seemed colder, darker. The storm that had been threatening for days finally hit, rain beating down on the roof of the farmhouse, the wind howling through the trees. The storm wasn't just in the sky, it was inside us, too. I looked at Emma one last time, my heart breaking. The world outside might be raging, but here, in this dark, hidden place, I felt like I had lost everything. And no matter how hard I tried to fight it, I couldn't deny the truth. We were no longer searching for a way out. We were simply trying to survive. The storm raged outside, the rain battering against the windows of the farmhouse, while the wind howled through the trees. Inside, Emma and I sat in the dimly lit kitchen, staring at the pile of papers on the table. The weight of our discovery hung heavy in the air, thickening the space around us. We had been searching for answers, but with each new revelation, we seemed to be digging ourselves deeper into a hole we couldn't climb out of. But as the night wore on, a strange stillness began to settle in, not in the house, not in the storm outside, but in me. I had spent so much time trying to make sense of what we had uncovered, but I realized I hadn't been asking the right questions. It wasn't about the land. It wasn't about the bunker or the treasure that we had believed was hidden beneath it. It wasn't even about the family secrets that had been buried for so long. No, it was about why we had been given this inheritance. It had never been about what we found. It had always been about who we were meant to become. As I sat there, the truth began to settle in like a quiet whisper. Everything I had believed about the inheritance had been wrong. We weren't just heirs to a piece of land, nor were we chosen to uncover some hidden fortune. The inheritance was about something else entirely. It was about redemption. And I finally understood that the treasure wasn't buried in the earth. It was buried within us. I pulled the letter from the pile of papers, the one that had started this whole journey. The one that spoke of a family legacy. The words that had once seemed so cryptic now took on new meaning. The land you inherit is not just a place, but a purpose. The bunker you find is not for treasure, but for truth. You will not be alone in this, for you have the strength within you. What is buried here is not gold, but a life you were meant to lead. The key to it lies within your hearts. The words seemed to echo in my mind as I read them again. The key was never meant to be found in the land or the bunker. It was always within us, hidden in plain sight. The inheritance wasn't about wealth or material possessions. It was about healing, growth, and connection. It was about embracing the life we had been given and finding the strength to rise above the darkness. Suddenly, I saw it clearly. The land was a symbol, a test. Not of our ability to endure hardship, but of our willingness to accept the gifts that life had given us, even in the most unexpected ways. The bunker, the symbols, the map, the letters, they were never about treasure. They were about understanding the depth of what we had inherited, the chance to rebuild, to heal, and to transform. I turned to Emma, who had been silently watching me, waiting for something to click. And as I looked at her, I realized the full weight of what had been given to us. It wasn't just a piece of land. It was a second chance. The storms we had faced, the isolation, the rejection, the brokenness, they were not the end of our story. They were the beginning of something new. Emma, I said softly, my voice breaking the silence, we weren't meant to find treasure. We were meant to find ourselves. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were different this time. They weren't tears of pain or fear. They were tears of relief, of understanding. She nodded, and for the first time in a long while, I saw hope in her eyes. We had been given the chance to reclaim our future, to take what we had been given and build something of our own. The land, the bunker, the mystery, they had all led us here, to this moment of clarity. And in that moment, I realized that the inheritance had always been about our transformation. It was about learning to stand tall, to embrace the past without letting it define us, and to create a future that was entirely ours. I smiled, the weight of the past finally lifting from my shoulders. We had been lost, but now we were found. The land we had inherited was not just an anchor, it was the foundation of our new beginning. As the storm outside began to die down, the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, casting a soft golden light across the farmhouse. The world was still, the silence broken only by the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. We were no longer alone, no longer isolated. We had each other, and we had a future that was finally within our reach. The journey was far from over, but now, we had the strength to face whatever came next. The treasure we had found was not in the earth beneath our feet, but in the lives we were about to build together. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance of all. As the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm, golden glow over the land, Emma and I stood in the middle of the field, letting the light wash over us. It felt like the world had shifted, like the storm we had weathered inside ourselves had finally passed. The weight of our inheritance, once so heavy, now felt like a gift that had been hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to find the strength to accept it. The farm was no longer just a piece of land. It had become the foundation of our future. The old, broken bunker, the hidden keys, the mysteries that had haunted us, they were no longer our burdens. They were our bridge to something new, something real. The land wasn't just a place to survive, it was a place to live, to grow, to rebuild. As the days ahead stretched out before us, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we were no longer the same. The past, with all its pain and loss, had shaped us, but it no longer defined us. We were no longer orphans. We were heirs to something far greater, the chance to create a future filled with hope. If stories of transformation, hidden truths, and second chances resonate with you, subscribe. Let's walk this journey together.